Welcome to the Thriving Outside the Box podcast. Join me, Dr. Kimberly Grocher, a licensed psychotherapist, executive coach, and yoga and mindfulness meditation teacher, as I shed light on the stories of leaders and entrepreneurs across industries who not only dared to create their own path in their careers, businesses, and lives, but have found a way to do it while thriving mentally, physically, and spiritually. I hope you walk away with the inspiration to do the same. So, welcome to another episode of Thriving Outside the Box. I'm Dr. Kimberly Grocher, and I'm so happy that you are joining me and my guest, Marie Deveaux, today. I'm very excited to have Marie. So, Marie, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, I love it. I always forget how amazing my friends are. You're like, Dr. Kimberly. I'm like, that's right.
Well, I can't wait for people to hear how amazing you are. So I am thrilled to have you on the podcast today.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I love a good conversation. So I'm Marie Deveaux. I am an inclusive leadership coach and a facilitator. I do a lot of work at the intersection of inclusive workplace culture and personal accountability. And I'm also a homeschooling mom and a bi-coastal girly. So I'm from California. And then I like to say I was finished in New York. So Brooklyn will still, I think, feel like home for me. And then recently moved to the American South, which is a whole different situation. I am a dancer, a creative, and a writer, and a lover of big ideas.
Love it. Love it. Love it. And that is such a brief summary of everything that Marie is, that you are. So like I told you before, and so people who have been listening to the podcast, this is all about your journey outside the box and how you've done it and how you have found a way to be well while doing it, right? And what that looked like. So I know when we met, what was that, like a decade ago?
At least a decade ago. Yeah. It's been a long time.
Marie and I met about 10 years ago because we were both invited to be a part of a mastermind. And eventually the mastermind disbanded, but it
was not successful.
We stayed connected.
It did its job though, because look, here we are.
Exactly. And at the time though, you were working for a charter school.
Yes, I was. Yes.
So tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. Well, so it's so fun. So career-wise, I think, always been really attracted to education. Coming straight out of undergrad, I knew I was not interested in business. I have a very love-hate relationship with capitalism. More like hate-hate relationship with capitalism. And so I started my career in the nonprofit sector, and I did AmeriCorps and lived in Prince George's County in Maryland for a year. And I was a caseworker for a program that was all about supporting adjudicated youth in Maryland. And many of those young people, we were doing truancy checks and taking them to tutoring and all of those things. And it occurred to me that a lot of what was fueling their behaviors that were leading to adjudication was just a complete lack of engagement in their school environment, in their educational environment. And so very early on, I was attracted to doing something in education as part of my youth development kind of journey or work. And so I have worked for a number of for-profit education companies that really focused on closing the education achievement gap, right? So, at the time, Title I was like new on the block, and people were getting a lot of funding for supplemental education programs to try and get all of these kids who had been left behind caught up in their basic numeracy and literacy skills. And so I ended up running an education center in Brooklyn that was like part of that kind of time or that era in our Department of Education's history, which is wild to think about now. But but I did that in Brooklyn. I helped run a center in the Flatbush section of Brooklyn, which is the Caribbean capital of the world outside of the Caribbean. And then I did that as a field manager. And so was training franchisees who were doing that for Kumon, which is a Japanese-based company that does a lot of math and literacy education. And then eventually that led me to working in the charter school sector and essentially training the grownups who were impacting and creating schools and new school systems in New York City. And it's interesting when I even think about that journey now, or I started looking at like, well, how can I be impactful? Like what's going to really make a difference for myself personally? And gradually seeing that kind of build to, okay, do I want to work with like a small group of kids on a caseload? Do I want to run a center and be focused on the community? Do I want to support leaders who are running their own centers in other places? And then eventually in the charter school system, I was training the kind of business and operations leaders who were opening new schools, right? And so thinking about in all of those places, how the focus was always, if we could just get education right? Oh my gosh, the future, people talk about children being our future. It's like, yeah, but are we setting them up for success? And so much of that I found was in the environments that we were creating for them. And one of the things we used to say when I worked in that environment was the classroom is always the second teacher. And so really thinking about the importance of environment and how we cultivate a mind and cultivate a person has always been something I've been really passionate about. But that's how I kind of made my way into where you found me, where we first met over a decade ago. And then I left that place. Life happened. Yeah.
I remember it was like at one of the meetings in Brooklyn where you were contemplating it. Like, I think that this is not it. And I think I'm going to leave. And I think I'm going to do. And then you were like, oh, yeah, I left. And now I'm doing this.
Yeah, well, it's funny, something I've come to really clearly recognize is when intuition speaks to you, and, depending on your leaning, you could call it spirit, intuition, whatever. But when you hear that voice, if you do not listen, you either move or you will be moved. So I've experienced it both ways, and it's more pleasurable when you move on your own accord.
Yes.
Okay. When I made my career switch, when I started and really ventured out as a full-time entrepreneur, I knew it was something I was meant to do. And I was kind of like biding my time. And I'm sure we probably had that conversation 10 years, I'm thinking about it. And then I got pushed. And the decision was less of a choice and more of a reality of like, this is what you're doing now. And to this day, I say it was a tremendous gift. And I'm sure as many people will tell you when they've had these kind of experiences, I wish I had moved sooner, right? I wish I didn't have to be pushed, right? And so even now, it's a constant attuning of like, am I listening? Am I listening? Like, let me get quieter to make sure I'm listening to how I am meant to move. Because again, God, spirit, he ain't waiting for you. He got plans. So, right? Like, so you either move or you will be moved. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Like I was just about to, you just said it, but I was thinking as you were talking, like, the courage to listen. So like, yes, you were moved, but also there was a courage in being able to stop and say, okay, this has been playing, and now it's here. And now what am I going to do? Versus, oh, I got to get back. I got to get into, so I got to, no, like, I don't want to listen to this because I'm afraid of this, or I think I'm not ready for this, or whatever your mind gets in the way of telling you. And that being quiet, that being still and saying like, okay, I got the message and I'm going to move on the message.
Yeah. Which is, it's interesting because anytime, and oh, that's right, we're not on video. Y'all, I'm a Black woman in America. Like, I mean, it feels so obvious, but like, let me say that out loud. But when I tell my story of transitioning into entrepreneurship and my experience with what ultimately ended up being a very toxic workplace for me, it is not an uncommon story. I don't know not a single Black woman in America who hasn't had an experience where they were forcefully moved. And not a single one of those women who I have spoken to, many of them I have, coached and become friends with and all of these things, there's not a single woman who will say, well, it took me by surprise, or I didn't have an inkling, or I had contemplated it already. And so it is that like, okay, so Can you pay attention to that voice more often, like with consistency now? Can you choose to be obedient to your own wisdom? And a lot of that it's a practice of discernment. And I mean, if we are not in a season of discernment, like get your discernment up, which requires often solitude, which requires quiet, which requires you to unplug from all of the stimuli that is trying to distract you from the wisdom that is within you, right? You got to get real quiet and really protect. People talk about protect your peace. Like, no, but literally, those quiet spaces are so valuable and you need them so that you can listen and be proactive about the steps you're taking instead of reacting to someone else pushing you around the board,
So, Marie, how do you tell your clients, or you, like even you, just in your own practice, right? How do you get quiet? How do you find those places and time for stillness?
Yeah. So for myself, I've come to really appreciate rituals. And that might be just part of my neurospiciness. My brain loves a pattern, a routine. I like some predictability in my day. And one of the things that I have really benefited from is a really consistent morning ritual. And because I am an entrepreneur, a business owner, and I can dictate my own schedule, I have grown accustomed to very long mornings, which just means I don't talk to anyone outside of my house before 10 a.m. And what that creates, right, is space for me to get all the way together and all the way resourced before I have to engage with, quote unquote, the world. And so I use that time I make my bed in the morning. I have my water bottle at my bedside, so I'm going to drink 16 ounces right away. I'm going to stretch or do yoga or some kickboxing or dancing. Then I got to meditate. Then I got to shower. I'm going to journal, right? I might read or listen to something that is inspirational or that tickles my brain a little bit. And then I'll sit and I'll review my agenda for the day and have a real breakfast, right? And those are things that are just so that I can feel whole and complete and that I am ready to be proactive about what I'm up to in the world for the next however long I'm going to be awake. And that has served me tremendously well. I don't get through my whole list of all of those rituals every day, but I'm like, if I can at least do 4 or 5 of these every day, I know I'm setting myself up for a day that's going to feel good and feel like I have some agency in it,
That's amazing, especially because you homeschool as well.
Yes.
So talk about that part, because I think sometimes people hear that and they hear the list and if they're not an entrepreneur, they kind of roll their eyes and oh, well, it's because, you work for yourself, you can do that, right? But no, you have other obligations. It's
right.
Not just you create the space to do that.
Yes. And it's so funny to hear you say, oh, well, you're an entrepreneur, oh, what a privileged position. And I laugh because I have more jobs now than I ever had working for somebody else.
Say that again. Oh my God.
I have more jobs, right? When people ask me, I recently did some work locally and participated in a leadership cohort, receiving training and support for myself as a leader. And, you have to apply for these things. So they're asking okay, well, how are you engaged in the community? I'm like, oh, well, I'm a business owner and I donate time here and I volunteer there and I'm sitting on this board here for this organization. And, I homeschool my kids. And when I eventually got accepted into the program, the executive director said, oh, so you're just casually mentioning 4 jobs. You just have 4 jobs. Because what happens when you do have full ownership of your time is you find new ways to create and contribute in the world. So yes, that is a privilege, right? To be able to contribute and to tap in and use the multitude of gifts that I have. And homeschooling is one of them. But we started homeschooling in 2020 during a COVID lockdown. And again, talk about move or be moved. My father was a staunch advocate for homeschooling. I have an aunt who homeschooled her children and her grandchildren. I have a cousin who graduated top of her class from medical school as a homeschool student, right? And so homeschooling had been in my family for a while. And it had been suggested to me previously. And I was like, I don't know anything about that. I ain't got time to figure that out. Homeschooling's not for Black folk, right? All of the excuses around what I thought it was. And then COVID lockdown happened. Our kids were at home. We got to see how completely inefficient their current school options and education options were. And when it came around for them to return to school, at the time, there was not a vaccine for my children's age group available. Mm-hmm. And I have a child who suffers from asthma. And we had already at that point been to the emergency room more times than I'd like to count. And so as a parent, I had to decide, do I risk sending this child who is vulnerable into this environment where there are no protections? And can I live with myself if the worst case scenario happens? Mm-hmm. Because, that's being a grown-up. You make choices and then you live with the consequences. And so I said, am I going to be okay with that consequence? And me and my husband decided we would not be okay with that. And so we chose to homeschool. And that was, I think, one of the most heartbreaking decisions I had to make as a parent. At the time, we were living in New York City. And if you are not familiar with the school system in New York City, my kids had gotten into, my daughter is, both of my kids are gifted and talented. My daughter got into the #1 gifted and talented program in New York. I think Nest Plus M is like the #1 public school in the country. Mm-hmm. It's reserved for kids who perform at the top 1% of those tested. And she got in. It's a K through 12 school. So she'd already gotten in. And as a parent living in New York City, trying to figure out and navigate the school system, I had won. Okay. Yeah. My son was going to be entering middle school at a gifted and talented program for computer science and STEM. I mean, I was like, I'm done. Right. And then COVID happens and the universe was like, no, you're not. I told you to do something. You're not listening. And so we were moved to start homeschooling. And I am fortunate my children are older, right? My kids are both preteen and teenager now. And it's the 2020s. Homeschooling don't look like what you think it looks like. My kids are very computer literate, very savvy. We have courses. They have classmates from all over the world. We get to have an a la carte experience where they get to really follow their passions. And then I get to kind of play the role most of the time of guidance counselor to help navigate and curate what the instruction looks like. But it is actually not a tremendous additional time burden. And a lot of what we found through unschooling, and really unschooling just means really learner-directed, right, instruction, is that there's no shortage of possibilities of what that could look like, right? So yes, they do some remote learning. We're part of a co-op, so they have classes with other students who have that ilk of that mindset. They can take classes at the community college, but it really opens up opportunity for them to move in the way that they are being spoken into, right? Because there are no limits. Like, oh, if you want to do that, okay, yeah, you should do that. My daughter's into musical theater and learning how to sew. And so she takes sewing classes at the local, fabric store, right? And that's one of her electives. But all of that to say, everyone can create routines, right? It's not just those of us with entrepreneurial pursuits. If there's a life that you're meant to live, there is a way for you to live it. Otherwise, it would not have been planted in you as an idea, right?
Marie coming through with the gems. I wish this one was video so they could just see our faces. But so thank you for explaining the homeschool, because I think that a lot of people don't really understand what it is and what it can look like, right? But then also this idea of like, if you've been given a vision, if you have this life that you're drawn to, where there's a will, there's a way.
Right. Otherwise, that would not have been planted in you if you weren't supposed to do something with it, right? Again, I'm like, spirit, God, the universe is very efficient. We're not wasting gifts, wasting ideas, visions, right? There's a reason. And I know you mentioned fear earlier, but this idea of sometimes I think fear and excitement get confused. And sometimes you don't know, is this the kind of fear that's pushing you to step into who you're meant to be, or is this protective, right? And I think it's, again, discernment will sort all that out for you. But that's real. What is your relationship with your fear,
So how did your relationship with your fear lead you to your current business?
Okay. So I knew I was going to leave my full-time job before I did. I had been moonlighting and subcontracting and doing much of the work that I do now for other companies for a while. And I had really hit the ceiling in terms of how I could learn and grow. as an employee at that organization. And so it was definitely like, I knew I was meant to move someplace else in order to grow. And the idea of stepping out on my own and being fully reliant on myself in that way was scary. At the time I was, my children were much younger then, were small. And it was like, okay, can I do this? Can I do this? Can I trust myself to do this? And so it was scary and there was fear, but I have found in my work, because I tend to work with a lot of women, we talk a lot about like imposter syndrome. And I have found imposter syndrome is trash and not real. Instead, we are often finding ourselves in a crisis of lack of self-love. Like, do you believe yourself? Do you trust yourself? Do you love yourself enough to move with what has been planted in you? Because oftentimes when we're afraid, it's like, oh, well, you don't trust yourself. Or you're choosing someone else's vision over your own. What has you do that? What has you doing that? Why are you discounting yourself in these spaces? That's not imposter syndrome. That's a lack of self-love. That's a deficit of self-belief. And that has nothing to do with anyone else, right? Mm-hmm. That's all about your relationship with yourself and your relationship with your fear. You have to start doing video.
I do. No, because I just resonate with everything you're saying, because I feel like a lot of times when I'm working with people or even just in conversation, with friends, with colleagues, and people talk about imposter syndrome, it's like, actually, that's not what you're talking about. Actually, this is what it is. You know what I mean? And yes, it's like you said, I did an episode a while ago on your relationship with yourself. And this is part of it, like learning how to trust yourself, learning how to check in before you listen out.
Oh, I like that one. Yeah.
I just came up with it, literally.
Oh, put that on a t-shirt.
It just came to me. So, no, but seriously, like often it's the reverse. We're listening and watching and seeing what other people do or say or whatever. And
measuring and comparing.
Exactly. Versus, like you said, getting still, being quiet, and really listening to yourself. And developing that ability to discern, acknowledging what's coming up for you, what's real for you, what your vision is. And then, okay, yes, you can be afraid or whatever, but then you move through it.
You keep moving. Yeah. Yeah. Which is, it's one thing to be afraid and keep moving. It's another thing to be afraid and stagnant. Right. And so it's funny because as a coach, and I'm sure this will resonate with you as well, but I often, when I meet new clients, I ask them, well, have you experienced coaching before? What do you think is about to happen in this conversation? And a lot of people assume that a life coach is like a personal advisor to your life. And I'm like, oh no, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I am here to support you to listen to yourself. Right? When we talk about reflection and coaching, it's like, I'm going to say what you said back to you, and then you tell me what you heard. Like, so what do you want to do? Right? Because it is a practice of learning how to listen to yourself. And in conversation, we get to see ourselves reflected back to ourselves in ways that sometimes we can't always when we're by ourselves. And so a coach acts as like that mirror, right? To help you listen to yourself and then decide how to move through the listening.
No. So the coaching is a piece, right? But I also know you do a lot of work in your writing, but also the work with these organizations and these corporations, getting them to look at them.
Yeah. So organizations are really difficult because as we've been discussing, so much of leadership is leading yourself first. And so when there are challenges in an organization, when culture starts to break down, a good part of that is somewhere in the chain, a leader is not doing their personal work, is not being honest about vision, values, ethos, and how they want to embody those things with other people and with integrity. And so when I work with organizations, it's usually because there is some breakdown in culture that's maybe manifesting as dysfunction in team relationship, right? I tell people I'm an inclusive leadership coach. People are like, what is that? I'm like, I'm a leadership coach. I support people around leadership. And for me, leadership by definition is inclusive. It is deeply an interpersonal skill, which means you have to have quite a high degree of self-awareness and honesty before you start engaging in relationship with other people. So a lot of the work that I do with teams is helping them around interpersonal skill development. We do a lot of communication coaching and training, supporting people around how they articulate their needs and what it sounds like in relationship when someone's needs are not being met. How are we going to address that as a community? What does that look like? And can we have agreements in place? So essentially putting language and intention around cultural norms for that group so that we can all be held accountable to how we have agreed to interact with each other, right? So it is a lot of supporting people through creating social contracts and then practicing that, right, as they work together. And it's also whenever we work with a team, I'm always very keen to be like, great, so the leader of that team needs to be engaged in one-on-one coaching. Because what we can't do is support a bunch of people, the body, to move in one direction and the head is still looking a different way. That's not going to work. So if the body going right, then the head needs to be looking right.
When you said that, I just started feeling like potential muscle spasms, like that's what came to like, that's really painful. Well, like if you think about it in your own body, like that doesn't work. That doesn't.
If you've ever taken a swim lesson, wherever the head goes, the body follows. So are we sinking? Or are we swimming? Like what? Which way? Like decide. But I've also learned that through experience. I've worked with enough teams where we do the teamwork and we engage the team. The team's like, yes, yes, yes. And then the leader is completely checked out and finds ways to not be held accountable to all this work that their team just did. And I'm like, oh, no. Oh, we can't have that. And I've been, I think, amazed, surprised, disappointed by the number of teams who will hire me or hire another, consultant to come in, pay good money, and then not do the work.
Yeah.
Why'd we do that then? We're just doing stuff for show. We want to say we did a training. We want to say that we did some cultural alignment. Like why? Because that's just a whole bunch of ego, performative stuff. But why do that? Why go through the machinations of work and transformation to only not be changed? It's too much work. It's too much work.
Oh, no, that's, again, you said it as I was thinking it, right? Like when you use that metaphor of like the head turning one way and the body going the other, I'm like, this happens so much. And in my work, I'm often working with people who are on that team. And so they're in therapy like, this is what's happening on the job. This is what's happening at work. I don't understand. And it's like, because it's exactly what you described is happening. And it's really hard to, again, if you go back to this idea of the body, it's very hard to tell the body, well, yeah, it's not you. Like, it's not like what you're feeling is real because this is what's happening. Right. And until this gets in alignment, it's going to be painful.
It's going to be painful. Talk about identity crisis. Like, oh, you're fractured. You're trying to be two different things at once. And that's where dysfunction, discomfort, friction, if you will, tends to reside in those places where there is misalignment. Now you got me all in my metaphor brain. Go to a chiropractor. They will find stuff that's not in alignment that you got very comfortable with and don't even notice anymore.
Yep.
But it's not until it moves, you're like, oh, that is better. What did you do? Right? Exactly. There are people who that's their whole job is to help you get literally back in alignment. And there are people who support that for individuals, for teams, for organizations. Like, let's get back in alignment. And of course, you can't see it. You're not going to understand that they're going to move your L6 this way and do like, that's not your job. You just got to show up and listen, do your exercises, right? So that you can create a more consistent practice of being in alignment.
So tell me how the writing feeds into this.
Oh my goodness, the writing. So this is also, I think, a good example of how long a discernment practice could really be, right? So I wrote my first book in the 4th grade at age 9. I have always loved writing. I shared with you earlier, I live in my head. I am a real, for real Pisces. And so I have a lot of creative outlets that really fuel me. And writing is one of my favorites. Dance is another. I went to school. My bachelor's is in English and American Lit, creative writing from NYU. I am a writer. And when I started working, could not see my way through to how writing was going to help me sustain myself. And so I did youth development work and I got into nonprofit and did all of these other things. And here I am, right? 4 decades into this thing called life. And I'm like, how come I'm not writing a book? And I am an avid journaler. I have journals that date back to the 4th grade at least. And so writing has always been with me, has been in me. I have a blog. I've had multiple blogs over the years, but I'm now in a place of like, oh, let's actually share these writings more prevalently with people. And writing, I think, is also, I know we could have conversations about different forms meditation can take, but writing is a meditation for me. And I do think for many creative outlets, there are ways in which you create to express yourself for yourself. And then there are ways that you create in order to express and connect with others. And so I am in the process of writing, creating a book that is going to be shared with others and express and connect with others. And it has been a beautiful experience to come back to something that I have loved for a really, really long time and to also engage with it in a different way, right? Writing with the intent to publish and for others to read it is a very different experience than writing in your journal every day or writing a poem for yourself in a notebook. And so there is also just so much quiet spaces and listening and dancing around some real interesting things around vulnerability that have come up in this process as well. But I've always been a writer. And sometimes it takes us a long time to come back to ourselves. And so here we are.
Like that alone is a journey, right? That alone is the journey. Like, so yes, there are these other facets we talked about, like with the coaching and the consulting and the, leaving the job and blah, blah, blah. And, which is all really important. But there's also this coming back to yourself and all of this, that writing was there from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And that there was some fear around, you tell me if it's fear or not, but like, graduating with this degree and being like, okay, I got to do something else because writing is not going to feed me.
That ain't it. That don't make sense. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then,
but it's also, I have, I don't know if you do this, but I have like Post-its of things that I need to remind myself of all the time. And one of my Post-its, I call them print and posts. I have clients. I'm like, you need to print and post that. But one of mine says, you focus on the what, let God figure out the how. Which again, discernment.
Yeah.
Right? You were told to do something and you're sitting here trying to figure out, well, how that going to work? That's not the assignment.
That's not for you to know. You don't need to know that.
You don't need to know. Like, start moving, right? We'll figure it out. And it has been that of like, can you move by faith? Which again, self-love, self-trust. Do you believe that you are capable of this possibility you're talking about? Which that in and of itself is a journey, right? Like, how do you get to that place where you trust yourself?
So I want to segue with that, right? Because everything you're talking about is so good and you've done it. And I always say, you speak with such confidence, such matter-of-factness. But I also know that, and part of it I know because we're friends, right? Mm-hmm. But also we know just being on these journeys that it's not easy. And there's a whole lot of obstacles and heartache. And so when you are doing your own thing, and I always like to remind people, whether that's in your life, whether that's in your career, whether that's in your business, but doing something that you have not been exposed to or you don't have a blueprint for can look glamorous, can sound glamorous, but it's also very hard. So how do you manage your wellness while you're doing this and what that even means to you?
Yeah. So you said something there, which I think is beautiful around, kind of like the messiness of transformation, right? And I think, I can say things with confidence. These are very simple ideas. Listen to yourself and move accordingly. Trust yourself. Very simple. Simple does not mean easy. Simple and easy are not the same. And transformation and change comes with work, with real work. There is a lot of shedding and grieving the you that was so that you can make room for the you that is to be. And that is painful. That's grief work, right? There's a lot of mourning in that. And just as it can be easy to say, oh, people live and then they die. Okay, simple, right? That's not easy. We are emotional beings. We get attached to our routines. We get attached to the ways that we move in the world. And so when we are called to change any part of that dynamic, it requires work. And the thing that does ease some of that work is being well-resourced. That means community, oftentimes. That means support, right? None of us moves through the world alone. It can sometimes feel that way, but that is a lie. So you sometimes have to remind yourself that you are supported and that you do have resources. For me, I think the journey of my life has been very much informed by an ecosystem of support. That includes my partner, that includes my children, that includes friends, that includes therapists, that includes coaches of all shape, size, and variety and expertise. But there is a humility in being able to acknowledge that you need help. And that requires you to humble yourself. That requires you to be vulnerable. That requires you to say out loud, I'm at capacity. I can't do more, right? I had a wonderful experience recently. I've lived in the American South now for 3 years, and I had my first experience of the meal train, which is where you're not able to do all of the things that you would do that would allow you to cook and prepare meals for your family. And so a phone tree of friends drops off meals to your house or will come to your house and cook home-cooked meals and leave them in your fridge so that you can be cared for as you're going through what you're going through. And I had this experience and I was like, oh, this is wild. Had me really thinking I had been doing friendship wrong my whole life. Because in order to activate a meal train, you would have to raise your hand and say, I need help. This thing is happening in my life where I am at capacity, and then allow people to help you. And so there's two pieces of that. One is in the asking, but the other is in the receiving. Can you accept the help that's being offered? So often, I mean, I see it all the time with clients. Oh, this, that. I don't know how to do this and that. It's like, well, who do you know who does? It's like, oh, well, my friend said she could, but I don't want to be a burden. But she said she could. Someone's offering help, extending a hand, and you're too proud to say, oh, thank you. Because that's all that's required. Someone extend, like, thank you. Yes. Right? But it is very difficult. And I think many of us have been acculturated to feel a lot of shame for needing help and needing support. Right? There's a lot of feelings of not enoughness that come with, I'm at capacity. Right? And we think there's something wrong with us because we can't do it all by ourselves, as though you were supposed to. No one is asking you to do life alone. We are communal creatures. Humans are pack animals. We form tribes. Where your tribe at? You out here in the wilderness by yourself? Are you crazy? What you doing? That's unnatural. That is unnatural. And so when people in your community extend help, you accept it. When you need help, you call out. But I think in a lot of ways been acculturated to not do those things, to think there's something more noble about this rugged individualism, about this, I got here all on my own, being able to stand up and say, look at me, look what I did. You're standing on shoulders. Yeah. Someone's probably holding you up right now, right? But this idea of it takes a village, but are you willing to activate that village and be honest about what you need? And some of that also comes, I think, with getting more familiar with the language of your own self-awareness to articulate your needs, which is part of that too.
So many things about what you just said. So first of all, I love how you shared that perspective on wellness, right? Which is why I try to have these conversations, right? Because so much of wellness in our world is like, oh, do some breath work, do some yoga, run, take a vacation, take a retreat, or whatever. And it's like, those are pieces. That can be part of it. But it's also, like you said, this deeper work and this idea of community. But even just deeper than community, being able to receive help, being able to acknowledge that you need help and receive help. And I was thinking through the therapist's mind too, because I was like, that's so important. And often, especially when you've had a lot of trauma, then not accepting help can be a trauma response.
Well, because to be able to receive requires you have to be vulnerable, which means you have to trust somebody, right? I spent 20 years in Brooklyn, New York, lots of great friends. Very few have ever been to my home. Why are you coming to my house? And especially, I think New York is also a culture where your apartment is the least attractive thing about living in New York. But the idea of you being really an intimate relationship enough where someone would come into your home and see how you live for real, right? Not on your best day when you're all dressed to the nines and ready to go out, right? But like the day to day requires you to be vulnerable and to trust that they're not going to judge you for that, right? Yes. But also navigating around those needs to trust someone to fulfill those needs, right? When you are vulnerable, right? So that's a scary thing.
It is. And you're so right. It goes back to, like you say, doing the work. And so whether it's because of trauma, whether it's because of you just not trusting, or for whatever reason, maybe it's not that, but it still requires you to do something uncomfortable. It requires you to do some work on yourself to be able to get to that point where you can receive it.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add, or is there a question you wished I asked that I didn't?
I mean, I know just on the topic of living outside the box, I'll share a brief story and maybe this will communicate what's in my head. But recently I listened to one of Michelle Obama's podcasts. Like she and her brother have this podcast. And so now, we listen to it like once in the car. So now it's like all over our YouTube feed. It's like everywhere, right? But I'm listening to the podcast and, it's just her and her brother having these casual conversations and they have guests come on, like all like A-list amazing people. And through their conversation, they'll just casually do their like sponsored spots. And I have so many feelings about it because I'm like, oh, Michelle Obama out here slinging somebody's insurance. But it's very natural, very conversational. And I'm like, oh, like this is how Michelle Obama gets paid. And so just having that acute awareness. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about it because I want Michelle Obama to live outside of that game. And I was looking at it and the spots are long. Like they'll go on talking about an insurance product or a new SUV that somebody sent them to drive.
Yes.
So, yes. I'm like, this is a sponsored spot. They just off on a tangent, casually talking about how they're using these products. And I'm like, they're getting paid for this. This is an advertisement. Again, pointing back to the consumer culture of our country, the capitalist kind of priority of everything. And I'm like, I don't want Michelle Obama to be doing that. And my husband, he was like, well, she's playing the game. That's the game. That is the game of America. That's the game. And I'm like, right, but I don't want her to play the game. And he's like, right, but you know what? You know what happens to people who don't play the game? They homeschool their kids and move to North Carolina. Right? So that's a choice, right?
Yes.
That's a choice. Choosing to live outside of the game, you sometimes see people who are still in it. And I'm like, I don't want you to do that. But we all get to make choices on how we navigate this life, right? And then are there moments when I do play the game? And then I'm like, yep, nope, I'm out, right? And so just what I would want to extend to people is maybe like offer yourself some grace as you're thinking about tiptoeing outside the box, jumping outside the box, stepping out and then stepping back in and then stepping out again. It's a journey.
It is. Because I'm sitting here listening to you talk about them spots. And I was like, I don't know. If somebody contacted me tomorrow and say, Kim, I'm going to give you X amount of thousands of dollars and I'm going to send a Rivian your way so you can get on your podcast and drive it. I can't say. I wouldn't say yes. I might be playing that game. I might be playing it.
So I'm like, is the game serving you? Can you be in integrity with the game that you're playing and how you're choosing to play it? Like there are degrees and levels to this, right?
Yes. That's such a great point. But
I have feelings every time she and Craig be going off. I'm like, I'm like, oh, here come a spot.
Yeah, they are long. I listened to an episode today and I haven't listened to an episode in a while.
Yeah.
And I was listening to it and I was like, oh, we got the whole family story going on. And
there's backstory. Like it's just so well integrated. You forget.
It is.
This is an advertisement.
It is. I was like, oh, that's kind of creative versus the...
Oh, yeah. No, it's
I know you're reading a script and...
It's so well done that you almost forget, which is really good ad placement. Mm-hmm. You're not supposed to notice that they're playing this track.
So in some ways, they're outside the box with the way they're playing the game.
Right. They're doing it differently. I like to think, and I'm a huge fan. I know, especially because so many journalists are getting kicked off of big networks. They're all going to YouTube. Mm-hmm. And Don Lemon is one, right? Mm-hmm. And when he does a spot, he's very clear. Like, I'm only talking about this because I actually believe in this product.
Right.
Right. Which I hope is true. I hope when people endorse things, it's because they're doing so with integrity, not because they're getting paid to do so.
I don't know. Don Lemon don't look to me like the type. My experience of him is not somebody that would put on.
Right. Well, that's, I mean,
like, I feel like he's going to be honest.
It's all at face value. I'm like, I don't know what happens between like him and his conscience late at night. Like, I don't know. But I like to think when I watch people like that, it's like, oh, yes, they need to make a living. And to your point, if someone's extending their hand, who were you not to receive it? But also, can you do that with integrity, right? Which is always my thing. It's like, okay, but like, who are you in order to receive that, right? Yes. What does that communicate? And also still, again, I'm like, woo, capitalism everywhere. Look, it's just everywhere. But again, thinking about like, well, you know, play your game your way. And that could be outside the box enough.
Yeah, you're right. Like, what is your way? Going back full circle, back to what you started with, which is, what is your vision? What is true to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, can you do that with integrity? Can you do that ethically? Mm-hmm. Can you do that where you're able to go to sleep at night?
Right. Because if you do all that and then you don't love yourself, well, what are we doing?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I'd be loving myself real nice in the Rivian, but you know, whatever.
I'm like, am I about to be on the Rivian website for no reason? Like, nuh-uh.
Actually, I'm not really a Rivian person. I'm a Porsche girl. So it's Porsche wanted
well, hopefully they hear this podcast. Yeah. I'm going to send you a little something.
Exactly. Anyway, thank you so much, Marie. I always love our conversations.
Me too.
I can't wait for your book.
Oh, me too.
Yes. So what is the title and what is it about?
So I can't tell you the title right now because I need to send my lawyer some money for my trademark.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Makes sense.
But yes. The book is about communication and relationship and how communication creates relationship or destroys it. It's about the ways that we come back to remembering ourselves in community and how we can cultivate that together. It's a lot of what I teach in workshops, what I've discovered in coaching people over the last decade. It's all of my favorite things. It's playing with words and what they have the capacity to do as tools, which we all know a tool can build. It can also destroy. And in this climate, we see that all the time. Mm-hmm. But it's about all of those things and the power of creating conversations that also foster a relationship.
Love it. Can't wait. Can't wait to recommend it. Can't wait to read it. And I will definitely have you back when it's done.
When it's done. Okay. Mm-hmm. I look forward to it.
When you're launching it. This is all, again, so great to have you, Marie. Thank you so much for being here. Your information will be in the show notes, but if you just want to share where people can find you and connect with you and learn more about you and if they're interested in working with you.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So you can find me on these internet streets at hightidesconsulting.co. I also have a personal site. If you just type my name, mariedeveaux.com, that'll pop up and you can learn about coaching or employee engagement or facilitation, workshops, online courses. We do a lot of things. But yeah, I hope to be in connection and community with more people on this journey. Yeah.
Thank you all so much for joining us once again on Thriving Outside the Box, and I will see you next time.